Hello everyone, and welcome to the MongoDB and Spring Boot tutorial by Dead of Night Studios. In this video, the viewer will become familiar with adding a MongoDB data source to a Spring Boot microservice. The viewer should already have prior knowledge in Java and web development in order to understand all the concepts covered in this video. But let's go ahead and get started. So in our last video, Spring Boot Quick Start, we created a menu microservice that has a controller exposing two endpoints, the menu items and menu item ID endpoint, and then a menu service which contains our logic for accessing the data. Right now our data is only mocked, and we're going to swap it out for the MongoDB data source. And in order to do that, we're first going to need to install MongoDB. So open up a terminal in Linux, and you can type in sudo apt install mongo. Once you do that, you should see all the packages installed, and then after a possible console restart, type in Mongo, and you should be able to run the Mongo shell. And it'll give you the Mongo version, the session information, any other configuration or system warnings for you. But I think these are okay, as they're just warnings and everything seems to be up and running. So let's go ahead and look at our databases by doing show dbs. It looks like we have an additional database. So let's go ahead and use menu, and we're going to drop it. So db.drop database semicolon. Let's go ahead and show DBs. Alright, perfect. So now we just have the admin for our authentication, our config for our database configuration settings, and local. So with all that, let's go ahead and exit, clear, and go back to our workspace. So in our workspace, we're going to need to go to the Palm file, and we're going to need to add a new dependency. The new dependency will be the Spring Boot starter data MongoDB. And so this will just give us access to all the nice and clean annotations and support for the MongoDB repository and document structure. So make sure that I have the right clean format. Save that file. Now let's go back to our model, the menu item, and do at document in parentheses collection equals 2 double quotes, and then we're going to name this items. As it's already under, or will be under, a menu database. So we have our document set up, but now we need to create a class to access our menu items, and we'll call it the menu item repository. And so in here, we're going to need to tell Spring that this is the repository, and repository, import our needed dependencies, and then we're going to need to change this from a class to an interface, as we're only going to need to set the method names or prototypes for this class. Spring will handle everything else. It will basically generate the wanted logic given a certain format within the method name. Or if we really want to override it and implement our own query logic, we can specify that specific logic with the Spring annotation at query, I believe. But we'll look at that a little later. So for right now, we need to extend the Mongo repository, and we need to set the type for that being menu item, with the menu item key field type being a string. And we can confirm that by going to menu item and seeing that ID is of type string. And this just helps Spring know exactly how to structure the data and what is the unique identifier. So let's go ahead and import, Mongo repository. Let's go ahead and import that. Now if we add a little space, let's create a paginated findAll method. So it'll return a page object with a menu item, and we'll do the findAll as the method name, and this will just accept a pageable object as such. So Spring automatically has this pageable object from the Spring Framework.data.domain. By importing that and the page object, we already have a nice, neat method that'll just query out to the MongoDB in a paginated fashion, given the extra parameters that we add to our header, such as size or page number, or even sort if we wanted. So Spring comes with all that nice, neatly packed for us and ready to go. We don't have to really do anything but provide the plain Java object to the method header or prototype. So let's go ahead and make another method called find one, and you notice here that we're following a pattern. It's either find all or find one, and then by, and we can add any of the menu item fields we want here, whether it be name, ID, description, but for this one we're going to do ID, and we're going to accept a string of ID. So great, we have our two methods now, or prototypes, or method names defined for our interface, and Spring is just going to generate that logic based off of our name structure, return types, and parameters provided. So we go back to the menu service, and let's go ahead and copy or comment this out because we might use it later. We're going ahead and create a menu item of items to return, and we need to first create a menu item repository object. Repository. And we're going to need to add the @autowired annotation so it scales appropriately with the service and controller. And we don't need to instantiate it at this point because Spring will take care of that for us. So menu item.repo.findAll, and we'll pass in the pageable object here, which we will pull in from the request. Let's go ahead and import that. Import page as well. Make sure that the return type matches, and awesome. I'm going to copy and paste this over, remove the page type, remove the S, and then update the method name to find one by ID for the get menu item by ID method. And we're just going to go ahead and return that item. So okay, we have everything we need so far set up for the Mongo repository. Everything's connected in the service. Now we need to go to the controller level, and we need to swap out the list for page and provide the pageable object as well. So once all that's imported, we should be good to go. One other thing. So our application needs to actually know where it's contacting or which MongoDB data source it needs to reach out to and what DB to use. And we can configure that all from the application.properties because of the nice uniformed architecture that this whole project has taken, and all the dependencies follow. So if we wanted to add anything, we could just go down here, make sure and use proper division of sections within the application.properties. So we'll call this the MongoDB settings. And then we'll just say Spring data MongoDB.authentication type. And we need to just let it know which database to check for the authentication rules. In our case, since we just installed the database, or the MongoDB database, and we haven't set up any authentication, we're not too concerned about it yet, but we need to make sure and at least tell it where it's going. Looks like it does not like my periods for some reason, but I'm going to copy and paste and move on. We also need to add the host, which will be localhost for us, the port, which will be 27017, and then the database, which we will call menu. Well, let's go ahead and see if it'll run. Okay, no issues there. We go to the terminal, we type in curl localhost 8080 with our menu items, and awesome, we get back this paginated object with a content, which will list all of our menu items if we had any in our database. The pageable object, which we didn't send over any data here. We could have, if we wanted to, added other parameters such as size, and if you see here, the size changed from default size to 20 to 10 in the returned pageable object. We can also set things like sorted or page number if needed. But it seems like it's working right now. We just don't have any data to insert. So let's go ahead and clear and go back to our console or our IDE. Stop it. Let's go to our menu, controller, remove this unneeded dependency. Go back to our menu service, and here we're going to create a public void init MongoDB class, or method. In this method, we really just want to add some mock data if the database is empty, and this is just to help developers get up to speed or have a nice, easy database to play with and access, really just for testing and demo purposes. So we'll go ahead and set that there, but we'll only call it if there are not any entities within the menu item repository. So menu item dot find all dot size greater than 0. So if there are any entries in the database, don't add new ones, but if it is equal to 0, then we want to create 2 new items, and we want to save those items in the repository and in our database. And so we just call save, or save all, because we will be passing an array of menu items and not a single menu item. So awesome. So we have this init MongoDB, but we don't know if it'll actually be called on start, or we know it won't be called on start because we haven't called it. So if we go to the menu application and the main method, we can see here that this is probably where we want to call any methods on start when it's just getting ready. And we want to do this here so as to not add any extra time delays to our users as they query our data. So the first thing we're going to need to do is pull out the configurable application context from the bootstrapped application. And then with that context, we're going to need to get the bean of the menu item service. And we're going to need to import, we just called it the menu service. I'm going to rename this to the menu item service in order to be consistent with the other naming conventions. Spring, or rather Eclipse, enables rather fancy refactoring. I'm going to allow it to do it to make sure and refactor all references to menu service into menu item. So once we have that, we can then call the method init MongoDB from the start main method. So now, if we start the application, and we go back to our console and query, we should actually see 2 results, and it looks like we do. Item 1 with the name item 1, and then an item 2 with name item 2. Awesome. And if we wanted to only return 1 item in that, we could decrease the size to 1, and now we're only seeing 1 of the items. Exactly what we wanted. Let's also confirm that our getItemById endpoint is working by grabbing one of these IDs and copying and pasting it over. And looks like it works as well. Fantastic. So now we have a MongoDB data source, and it looks like we're entering in data, if there is none, on start of the application, which is exactly what we want to do for now. Let's go ahead and clear this console and go and make sure that our data is actually in MongoDB by opening up the Mongo shell. So it looks like our menu database is back. Spring automatically created it, knowing that we would need it, even though there was no menu database or items table collection rather created before. So let's go ahead and use menu, and with this we'll do db or show collections to make sure. Alright, so we have the items collection. So let's do db items find and see what it has. It has 2 menu items. So it looks like our IDs have been mapped over, even though they have this underscore here, which is natural for MongoDB. It did the inherent mapping to our ID field, as they're pretty much the same. It has our name and description and our price, and then it also has a class type, letting us know what it was cast from, because this was code generated. So it looks like our data is there and ready to roll. So let's go ahead and exit and go back to our main application. Now, we have most everything set up, and we might want to additionally look at search or filter operations or methods that we'll add to this service class. But we'll go ahead and look at that in another video. So thank you for watching, and hope you enjoyed.